What is Jesus saying? What's he on about? That he didn't come to bring unity, but he came to bring fire, to bring disunity. Compare this verse to the verse where Jesus says, it is by the unity you have for one another, the love you have for one another, that people will recognize me. But here, Jesus is saying that he came to bring disunity. But I ask you also to take this scripture verse and compare it to the verse where he talks about the plow, where he talks about choosing me. He says, if you love your mother and father more than me, if you are at your plow and you look back, then you are not worthy for my kingdom. So let's just try and understand what Jesus is saying here. Put it into context. This was said at a time where Christianity was beginning. Of course, Jesus was there, and he knew that he was about to bring division, because the major religion where he was the Jewish religion. And all of a sudden, when Jesus died and rose again, people started to believe in Jesus. Jews started to believe in Jesus. So they became, in a sense, a sort of sect. They became perceived as a little cult, that people who experienced this gave their life to it because they experienced the risen Lord. But those who didn't, who were on the outside, would see them as heretics, would see them as people who are fanatics in a sect that people didn't want to associate with. In fact, Christians were looked down upon. You spent your whole life being a Jew. You spend your whole life serving the Lord, the God, as a Jew, and then all of a sudden your child decides to convert and go to this sect. What do you think the reaction of the parents would be? Daughter, son, you cannot do this. But they persist, they insist, because they've encountered the love of God so profoundly that they cannot hold back. And they go and they join anyway, even though their parents are telling them not to. They're choosing Jesus above being obedient to their parents. And what happens? Many of them get kicked out of their houses. Many of them get disowned, because if you were a Christian at the time, it was a dishonor to the family. And so it brought about division. People who chose Jesus above everything were in a place of division, a place of conflict. They were cast out of their house. They often didn't have any belongings. Now you fast forward to this year, and this is still happening. I have even people who I surround myself with from day to day. They're looked down upon by their parents, by husbands and wives, and even grandparents who are even Catholic themselves, but they cannot understand why this person decides to become a missionary, decides to serve the Lord through this ministry. They can't understand why they decide to go to Mass every Sunday and even every day of the week. They can't understand, to the point where they're thinking, you're a religious fanatic. Every time they talk, they're just put down because they're a religious fanatic. You see, the division is still there in some ways. You take Muslim countries where people decide to choose Jesus after they have an encounter with him, and they're kicked out of the house. They're even killed because they do that, persecuted. But they choose Jesus anyway. What does this say for us? The minute it is too difficult, it's too cold, we don't go to Mass. The minute we struggle a bit, we lay down our morals. And yet, so many people lay down their life, lose families, lose their livelihood, division within the family because they chose Jesus. I want to have the courage. I want to have the courage to choose Jesus no matter what. You see, Jesus came, and he's the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. But sometimes to choose Jesus, you have to choose Jesus above other things that are good. And sometimes that brings about division. But we still need to choose Jesus.